I used to study 2 semesters at once. A little bit more than a year ago, I was in the second semester and I studied large parts of the sixth semester as well. Of course, originally I started by studying both the whole of the second and the whole of the sixth semester. However, in the first few weeks, I dropped 2 modules from the sixth semester. And so in the end, I completed the whole of the second semester and 3/5, so 60% of the sixth semester as well. And while I did that in the second semester, I no longer do that. Now I'm between the fourth and the fifth semester, and I have not done that in the third semester, in the fourth semester, and neither will I do it in the fifth or in any future semester. You see, while at that time studying 2 semesters at once, or rather 1.5 semesters, was an amazing choice, now I kind of realized that this is not worth it. And so in this video, I want to explain what motivated me to study 2 semesters at once, then how the experience actually went, and finally, I want to explain why I no longer do that, why I realized that although at that time that was the right choice, retrospectively, if I could go back, I would probably not do it again. And so, let's get started. Why did I want to study extra? Well, let me tell you briefly how the story of my life went. So, at 13 years old, I got started on self-improvement. I started my first business, which was back then a mental math app, so a math learning app. And I worked on it for 3 years. So, until about the end of 12th grade, so until about I was 16 years old. Shortly before I turned 17, of course. And what's interesting is that because I had this purpose, everything in my life went extremely well. I had no struggle with wise, and every day of my life went approximately like this. So I'd get up at 5, then work a few hours on my business, then I would go to school, work at school as well, socialize at school, then I would go to the gym, then go on a walk, then work a little bit more, then record videos. And this is essentially how my life went. Of course, not for the whole 3 years, because some of the self-improvement things I started doing significantly later. But this is generally what my life was like. And then, when university was beginning, or rather when the 12th grade ended, everything went downhill. So, because I realized that after 3 years of working on my business, it kind of didn't work, because I started with the product and then tried to market it, which is not the way how you're supposed to do it, by the way. I quit working on it after 3 years. And from that point, kind of everything went downhill. And especially when university started, that everything was new and I was alone in a new city, my mental health severely declined. And also because I didn't like university itself, as was my new environment, my mental health declined even more. So did my physical health. And so in the end, from going to a life where I would get up at 5, then work, then socialize, then go to the gym, my life went like this. I got addicted to porn. I stopped socializing. I stopped going outside. The weather was also not good that year. And just everything went downhill. Physical health got worse. Mental health got worse. Social skills got worse. Physique got worse. Everything got worse. I completely fell off from how I used to live before university. And while a lot of people, basically 90% of the population, generally live this way, where they watch porn, then don't really go outside and don't really do anything productive, for me this was a massive shock because of how the way that I used to live before that. You can imagine how much the perception of myself suffered, on top of the suffering that I caused myself through allowing these vices to enter my life, you know? But also, one of the other reasons why my life became so shit, and this turned out to be correct, was that I just had too little to do. I realized, or rather I theorized, that if I had more to do, if I had more pressure, then those vices and the way that I was living and all these problems would probably go away, because before that I had a lot of pressure and my life was amazing. And so my first reason, my first motivation for studying extra was that I wanted more pressure so that I would return to virtuous ways. The second reason why I wanted to study more was because I wanted to be done with university faster, given that I hated it so much and that also I didn't really want to do it. I decided, well, I should probably get done faster. One of the other reasons why I wanted to get done faster was that I understood that compared to my other classmates, I'm not that intelligent, and so my grades are mediocre, even if I study all day. And so I understood that if my diploma is going to be worth something, I study electrical engineering, by the way, then I probably have to do something else. And I figured probably that's going to be finishing university faster. And the third reason why I wanted to study extra was that I wanted just to have something cool to tell. I wanted to experience something and I wanted to record a video about it. So one of the things that's interesting about the time before university was that I had kind of a lot of cool experiences. A few weeks before this, before I fell off, before university started, for instance, I did 100 cold approaches in 4 days, which is an amazing story. Or shortly before that, I recorded, for instance, 10 videos in one day. A few days before that, I ran 10 kilometers in 39 minutes. So I had all of these stories, all of these experiences that I had before I fell off and university started. And I wanted to have another such story. And that story is, well, why I studied in the 6th semester at 17 years old. Or rather, why I studied 1.5 semesters, to phrase it less dramatically. So I wanted to have something cool to talk about. I wanted to experience something. I wanted to not waste my time. I wanted to get out of the shithole that I brought my life into. And also I wanted to get done faster. Those were the motivations why I studied extra. And of course, I also understood from having skipped the 9th grade that there is no such thing as foundational knowledge. You see, when you, let's say, build a business, then you need foundational knowledge. But in school or in university, that's actually not true. Because here's the thing. A good module assumes as little as possible. And therefore, the professors who are good will assume that you know basically nothing. And given that, it kind of makes sense why modules don't really depend on another. And so, by extension, you can study something new, even if you don't have the foundations. And this also makes sense because that the fact that these foundations don't really exist is because some people went to this university, some people went to that school, some people did a gap year, and everything and everyone kind of has a different foundation. And so the people there try to make every module more or less self-contained, which is why even in electrical engineering, or rather medical engineering, what I actually study, you can study subjects from the 6th semester without having to do anything before that, right? And also, here's another fact that makes this foundational knowledge type of thing kind of irrelevant, which is that if there is, let's say, a math module, then that math is going to focus on math. But when there is another module that builds on the math module, then the module that builds on top of it probably does not need you to know the math module in very great depth. So even if you don't have the first module, you can a lot of times still study the second module, the one that builds on top of it, simply because of the way that these things are structured. And so, to tell you how it went, no, I did not have any gaps that I needed to fill out. I had all the knowledge that I needed for the 6th semester. I had already learned it at school and in my free time from having built the math learning app. I also knew quite a lot of things from programming to artificial intelligence to all these type of things, right? And what also happened was that my vices indeed got significantly less, and I more or less could repair my way to how I lived before I fell off in the 1st semester. And so my vices got significantly less, my physique got better again, or rather it started to recover, my social skills were better again, my physical health got better again, I started to go on more trips, so everything got better because I had that little bit more of pressure. So indeed, I was right. You don't need foundational knowledge, and you also, if you need this pressure, if you need that extra, then perhaps, or most likely, it will also make your life better, because it did for me, right? And now, why do I no longer do it? Why do I no longer study extra? Well, I have 3 reasons for it. The first reason is that it is against my interest to finish university faster, because I kind of like it. And the second reason, because no one cares. You see, in the 1st semester, I had kind of a very shit existence, but in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I'm now between the 4th and the 5th, it was actually really pleasant, because I understood that university is actually the time to kind of find yourself, even though that sounds kind of cringe. It is that way, because you can socialize, then you can train, then you can study for 2 hours, then you can go on a random trip on the weekend, and then you can just take 2 weeks off and go on another trip, and then you can record a video about it. So the first reason why I no longer study extra is because I realized that university actually can be quite pleasurable, especially now in the higher semesters where it's more relaxed. In the first few semesters, it's of course harder, but in the semesters after that, it gets progressively easier. And so actually now I want to study longer, because I understand all these benefits. Like, for instance, when you work and you're a student, you're allowed to make a lot more mistakes than when you're already out of university, because when you're out of university, you're an unemployed man who doesn't know anything. And when you're a student, well, then you're a student and you're allowed to be a loser. So this is why actually university is kind of fun. I understand now. For instance, in the last year, I flew around 30 times. So I traveled a lot. And this is not possible when you go to school, and this is also not possible when you work. And so the first reason why I actually don't want to study extra is because now that I have restored my way and now that I'm back on self-improvement, university is extremely fun, right? The second reason why I no longer study extra is because actually no one cares if you get university done quicker. Okay, let's put it this way. Let's say you finish university at 20 and then you start working, right? Or let's say you finish at 23 and then you start working. Nothing really changes. Of course, you would think that if you're 20 and you've already finished university, that then people are gonna take you more seriously, or that they're gonna think, wow, he's such a high performer. He finished a 5-year degree in 3 years. But actually, that's not true. You see, I applied to many jobs before, because I wanted to work in the summer between the 2nd and the 3rd semester. And guess what? No one was interested. And so although I was studying 2 semesters at once, no one actually cared. And so that leads me to believe that actually, whether you're 20 or 23 or even 25, it doesn't actually make a difference. And look, personally, I don't really care about working a 9 to 5 because I don't really want a conventional career. This is why I record videos, by the way, part of the reason. And this is also why I started my first business at 13, because I don't want to live that kind of 9 to 5 lifestyle. If I were to sacrifice so much to then finish university faster, then I would just have to work the 9 to 5 that I don't really want to do for longer. And that doesn't really make sense if you think about it, right? Of course, my assumption was that people would care and that, if you finish a 5-year degree at 20, that's somehow exceptional. As it turns out, although it is extremely exceptional, no one actually cares. Because if you work for a year or 2 years, then you're also 22. And no one cares. You don't really get an advantage. And if you think that you want to get into elite university, and this is why you need this high performance, then it actually makes more sense to get better grades and to then also do a lot in your free time than it is to just half do everything and then finish university with mediocre grades, but at 20, right? So the first reason is that when you're in self-improvement, university is extremely fun because you're social, you work out, you travel, and so on. And you only have to work 4 hours a day or something like that. The second reason is that actually no one cares if you finish university faster, and that even if you do, you just have to work longer, which doesn't make sense, right? Why should you want to do that? Life is short enough, and youth is even shorter. And the third reason why it's not worth it is because I realized that it makes way more sense to not sacrifice everything for a goal that I don't actually want to achieve. It makes a lot less sense to sacrifice everything for a goal that I don't want to achieve than to just do many things in my free time. It makes more sense to have an amazing physique, to have an amazing social life, to travel a lot, to experience a lot, to record a lot of videos, to have a lot of stories, than it is to finish university a year or 2 years faster. Because imagine this. Let's say I'm 23 years old and I finish university, I finished the 5-year degree. If I then also, so to speak, graduate with an amazing physique, many stories, a lot of social skills, that is significantly better than graduating with nothing because you sacrificed everything to finish university faster. And so, this is why I believe that finishing university faster is kind of a waste. Because not only is university fun and you have many advantages as a student, not only does no one else care that you finish university faster, but also it makes a lot more sense to be more balanced in the sense that you also develop socially, you also develop physically, you also travel a lot, you also have a lot of stories. That makes a lot more sense than trying to enter the workforce a year earlier, right? But of course, this video has a massive exception. A few actually. The first exception is that if you're 25 or something like that, you should try to get university done as quickly as possible. Because when you're 25, you kind of leave the socially accepted range of being in university. Because look, let's say you download a dating app and you write that you're studying and you're 24. Well, no one cares, right? But if you're 26 and you still study, then that is kind of strange in a lot of ways. Unless you've worked before that and you did some apprenticeship before that, then of course people will understand. But it's kind of weird because an apprenticeship takes 3 years. The university takes 3 years or 5 years. So people are going to ask themselves, what did he do between 26 and 18 years old? What did he do the last decade, basically? Right? So if you're above 25, you should try to get university done as quickly as possible. And the other exception is that if you're extremely, extremely bright and want to work in an academic field when you're older, and you find that science is your passion or engineering is your passion, then also does make sense to finish university faster or to study more things at once and to then really focus on getting good grades so that then you can compete and get a very exceptional job, like at the particle accelerator in Switzerland, for example. That absolutely makes sense. But if you're not really interested in academics, if you're not really interested in working 9 to 5, and if you're below the ages of 25, then trying to finish university faster is, in my experience, a waste of energy. It makes a lot more sense to do a lot of other things, to travel a lot, to socialize a lot, to have a lot of stories. Those things make a lot more sense because life is long enough to work. And when, let's say, you're 55, will you really care whether you finished university at 20 but have no stories, or you finished it at 23 but you experienced so much? If you're 55, you probably will have wanted to have experienced a lot. So the second option, and not that you finished university 2 years faster, sacrificed everything to do so, to then work even more. No one probably will wish that, unless, of course, you really, really want to get into science, then of course it does make sense. And so, long story short, don't study 2 semesters at once. It's a waste of energy. There are so many better things that you can do, especially when you're young. And even if you really want to work, even if you really have goals, like I have with YouTube, for example, then it makes more sense to study a little bit less and to record a little bit more than just to just study, So even if you are very ambitious, probably it makes more sense to study slower and to work on your ambition in the meantime, right? So long story short, there is a time to work and there is a time to be young, to be social, to travel, to find out what you want to do in your life. And this is when you're young. So don't sacrifice everything to finish university a year or 2 years faster. It just doesn't make sense. There is so much to do when you're young. And so, my name is Grill. My goal is to inspire 10,000 good decisions. And if this video helped you, subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.